This is the hour, the Stephen Hour. Welcome to my first ever episode in this ongoing James Bond movie reviews. Now, James Bond has been around for over 50 years, roughly 58 to be precise, and it is the longest running film franchise in cinema history. And to say that it's been around for that long, and with 24 official movies under its belt, along with two unofficial films, and a soon to be a 25th official film coming hopefully some point at the end of 2020, although the film was supposed to have come out earlier this year, but because of COVID, the whole thing was pushed back a few dates. Now, James Bond is one of the most iconic film characters in cinema history. His films have absolutely been fun to watch for not just me, but for all the Bond fans, the whole community in general. It's just a fantastic film franchise for me. And of course, when I started up this channel, of course, that was the main reason for doing it, was for my love of Bond. But I've been neglecting to do that series for quite a while, to do more videos for that for quite a while now, in favor of other projects. However, I feel like I really want to do a film review, particularly Bond. Now, I've done other film reviews, of course, in the past, but I feel like this is just a perfect time to do it now. So here we are. We are doing all the Bond films in order of their release, from the very first, all the way to the current one, hopefully in time for No Time to Die. A film that will essentially be the end to a famous Bond actor's era. And it's something I'm really looking forward to do. Now, like I said, we're doing the very first Bond film, so, ladies and gentlemen, this is the review of Doctor No. Now, before we go on, let's get a little bit of background of not just the film, but for the franchise in general, because there's a few gaps that need to be filled in before we go forward. Now, first off, the James Bond character was actually derived from a long-going book series. Now, the book series was written by author Ian Fleming, who, during World War II, was a Navy intelligence officer, and he planned, as soon as he got out, to write a spy thriller to end all spy thrillers. And as a result, in the early 1950s, 1954, I'm confident that is the date, correct me if I'm wrong, he released the novel Casino Royale, which was essentially the first Bond book. After the success of that novel, other Bond books began to follow throughout the 50s and even 60s. Now, Casino Royale was actually later, Ian Fleming would later sell the rights to produce Casino Royale to a producer who later would adapt it into a sort of 3-part TV movie, I guess you could say, in 1954, starring Barry Nelson in the role of James Bond, although in the project he is called Jimmy Bond, and the character is not a British agent, but is actually an American agent. Yeah, so that's a bit of a shock. Overall, maybe I might review that later, down the line, somewhere in the future, but as far as I know, it is not very well received. Now, after that whole thing, Ian always wanted his novels to become films. Eventually, two producers by the names of Harry Saltzman and Albert Broccoli, better known as Cubby to his friends, approached Eon to have the rights to produce the novels into films. Now, Eon gave majority of the rights, but he couldn't give them Casino Royale, as he had already given it away to another distributor years ago. Now, the producers would later later come up or invent the production company called Eon, which stands for Everything or Nothing, EON, to produce the films, and they will be distributed through United Artists. With a budget of, depends on who you ask, it's either 1 million or 900,000. The film would be released in 1962. Now, let's get on to the cast, shall we? The cast for this film includes the following. In the leading role of our famous British secret agent is a Scotsman named Sir Sean Connery. An absolutely great actor, in my opinion, hands down. He's been in everything, but he's got his first major big break and superstardom while starring in the James Bond series throughout the 60s. Now, according to many, Ian Fleming didn't want Sean Connery, thought he was too rugged and wasn't British, but he later would grow to like him in the role and thought he was a perfect fit. So in later novels, he made that Bond's origin, though he is a British agent, his roots are from Scotland. So we can thank Sean Connery not for his performance, but for also being an asset to helping fulfill Bond's mythos. Later we have the beautiful Ursula Andress in one of the most iconic Bond girls of the series as Honey Rider. Right here in a famous scene of the film and of course cinema history. And here as the villain for the film is Joseph Wiseman as Dr. No. And not just like many of this film, there are some iconic moments for the series. Very, very good. We have here Bernard Lee in the role of Bond's boss M, head of MI6. Here we've got Jack Lloyd in the role of Felix Leiter, a famous Bond ally, and a sort of very special character that will be recurring in the series. I'll explain it in future episodes as to why he's special, but I'll get to that later. Here we have, of course, some minor characters like Professor Dent, portrayed by Anthony Dawson, just a minor character in the series, in the film. We also have another Bond ally, Quarrel, portrayed by John Kitzmiller. Hopefully I pronounced that name right. Also, other members of the cast include Miss Moneypenny, portrayed by Lois Maxwell, who, just like M, who I failed to mention, would actually reoccur in this role for many, many films. And these are often the greatest depiction of these characters. Here we got Major Boothroyd, essentially played by Peter Burton, who is essentially this film's Q. Although he's called Armorer in this one. We also have you have minor characters such as Sylvia Trench, portrayed by Enid Gasson. Hopefully that name's pronounced right. Probably not. You also have Colonel Strangways, the very small role, but is actually integral to the plot. And that actor's name honestly escapes me for the time being. And of course, there's Miss Yo. Is it Jeez, I don't normally trip up on my words here, but it seems that I am. Miss Yoto. Wait, Miss Taro, I believe her name was, portrayed by Xenia Marshall. Now, something that you got to understand, for a lot of the 60s Bond films, and essentially the films from that period, majority of these actors that played these roles are sort of characters that are just very unheard of at the time. which is Sean Connery's case, and that's also Ursula Andress's case. But for the rest, they were just like known character actors, those that have done roles in films before, and also stage. So that's what I've always found to be very interesting about the cast of these films. And that's something I think everyone should really take into consideration here. You don't always have to have big name stars to be in films. Sometimes it's good just to stick with very small, very little known actors, really. And that's honestly what I really like about this. Now that we're done with the cast, we've done with the history, let's get into the actual film. Now, our film opens up with one of the most iconic moments of any Bond film. The classic gun barrel scene, which involves, we zoom into this guy walking across. He would then turn around and fire his gun. The Bond theme music would kick in, blood drops, and the camera would shake to its side, and then the guy would disappear from view, and would kick off the movie that way. This is something that's been a staple of the Bond series since the very beginning. And again, this film is also a bit dated in many ways. As in the opening with the gun barrel, like there's all these bright lights to the James Bond theme music, which is just so epic and awesome, and one of the most iconic theme songs in all of cinema and all action movies. But then it gets to this weird, I can't exactly describe it, but basically there's these people dancing. Like I said, there's some bits of this film that's pretty dated, but I'll get to more of that after we actually get through the in-depth bit of, because what I'm doing a full in-depth of the plot. Not like I do with my usual movies, as I want you to do it for South, but for Bond, because I have a passion for this franchise, I have a passion for the movies, I feel I just would honestly want to do that better for these films. Anyway, after that, we cut to this, these, I guess you could say, 3 blind mice men. Basically, these 3 blind guys walking over the city, or this city, or town, or village. I guess I can't exactly describe this, if it is a city. Basically, walking all over until they reach this club, where Colonel Strangways comes out, a character that is essentially, we find out, is an MI6 operative, or agent, and gets gunned down, with silencers of course, and the body is then taken and sent away. Next thing you know, his secretary also gets killed, but we also find out that they not just killed her, they also take away some files, such as Crab Key, and a file on a man named Dr. No. We then cut to the famous scene where Bond's in a casino, and Bond has his legendary introduction line for the first time. My name is Bond. James Bond. Sean Connery does it absolutely tremendously, and he does this to Sylvia Trench, a minor character that's at the casino. And of course, here we get to see use his charm for her, charm on her, and he would then leave, as he's been summoned to M's office. Here we get a small, very brief scene with Moneypenny, something that'll be a recurring thing throughout the series. And of course, another thing that has been a thing throughout the series, when Bond goes to M's office, there is a debriefing. And of course, Q comes in, although this is not the proper Q, but he basically comes in to replace Bond's gun from a Beretta, which Bond had been using a lot in many of the earlier Bond novels, until eventually changing it to the iconic Walther PPK that this Bond would use throughout the Bond novels, throughout the Bond films, and of course in the novels, which has become his trademark gun. After that, Bond is then sent to Jamaica, where not only has to find out what happened to Strangways, but he has his life, several attempts on his life made numerous times. This includes almost getting, a driver essentially trying to take him away from a place he's meant to go, and try to kill him. Of course, instead of being taken into be questioned, he kills himself. There's also him being stalked by a photographer who is in league with this mysterious man. And yeah, basically, many things happen to him. We also get introduced to Felix Leiter and Quarrel, the allies of these films, with Felix Leiter becoming a recurring member in some Bond films. And doesn't really have much of the presence like Moneypenny, M, and Q would, sad to say. But I really hope that for one day, this character can get the respect he deserves in the Bond series, as I still think he still hasn't gotten it yet, but we'll get to that later. We then find out that Strangways had actually met Quarrel and those two have gone to Crab Key. But we're planning to go to Crab Key, but never really got there. The reason being because Crab Key is owned by a warlord by the name of, as a Chinese scientist by the name of Dr. Julius No. Hence the title of the movie. Here, more attempts are made on Bond's life, getting killed by a spider, trying to be run over off a cliff, but of course he ends up killing the guys in the car, who turns out to be the three blind men, and of course the driver. And as this is happening, he finds out that an operative, Professor Dent, is working with this Dr. No, and was partly responsible for the death of Strangways because though they haven't gone to Crab Key, the island, they've been going to the surrounding islands and finding out the rocks there are radioactive. And he had lied to Bond saying that they weren't, proving, at least raising Bond's, ire, curiosity. Also, the Miss Tara character is also in League with Dr. No and also tries to kill Bond as well. And it's essentially this film's classic femme fatale. Although, unlike most femme fatales in Bond movies, she doesn't get killed, but she gets taken away, something I find very unusual. But then, of course, after the failed attempts on Bond's life, after being ordered by this mysterious Dr. No, who we still haven't met yet as the film goes on, Professor Dent decides he's going to go and deal with Bond himself. So he goes to try and kill Bond. Bond knows he's coming because he sensed a trap as the moment he entered Miss Taro's apartment, or bungalow, I guess you could really call it that. And as a result, we get to see one of the most iconic moments of what has made the Bond character so special. And that is, as soon as Dent enters the bungalow, using up all his bullets, shooting at a bed filled with pillows, thinking that was Bond, he then gets cornered. Yep, cornered. And Bond then deduces how he knew that Dent was involved, not because he lied about the rock samples, but because he knew the name of the secretary. And Strangways has rarely at all mentioned the secretary to the other guys. At least that's how I got from it. And of course, whilst he's basically interrogating, he doesn't know that Dent is secretly trying to get his gun closer to him. Which he does, quickly gets it, and attempts to fire, but is empty. And Bond just turns around and calmly says, "Rush, Smith & Wesson, and you've had your sex." Cold-blooded kill, and that's Bond. He will kill people in cold blood if necessary. Yet he is a secret agent after all. So all this is happening, and yeah. An iconic kill in the Bond series. After that, Bond and Quarrel quickly get on a boat to go to Crab Key, and as soon as they get there on the cover of darkness, they go camp out there at the night, then wake up in the morning, in which Bond meets Ursula Andress, says Honey Rider, coming out of the ocean in that bikini with the knife belt, singing underneath the mango tree. It is absolutely stunning, and from what I heard, many teenagers of the day constantly went to this film numerous times just to see this scene. And something tells me a lot of guys would have really enjoyed that scene back then. After that, after an interesting encounter with the two, exchanging conversation, a bit of banter, and eventually the two kind of form a partnership to go further into the island. As they do this, they hear the what we've been told in the before this scene, way before in the film, that the island is supposedly haunted because not only you're not allowed to go there, but apparently there's a dragon. Bond doesn't believe in that. Honey Rider says there is one. Quarrel says there is one. And as they get further, they find out that this so-called dragon is actually a sort of a special vehicle that has a flamethrower coming out, looking like a dragon. Eventually, gunplay ensues between Bond and Quarrel with this motorized dragon, but results in Quarrel getting killed. One of the first Bond allies to have this fate that many would proceed. After that, the Bond and Honey are taken away and decontaminated. As it turns out, during their time on the island, they came into exposure of radiation, and as a result, they get decontaminated. And another thing is also very prevalent in the series is the villain's lair. It's almost practically a resort, and it's a stunning set built by the people who made it. Absolutely fantastic. And of course, after build up, Bond is eventually sent into the dining room along with Honey in, newly dressed clothes, and here they come face to face with the main villain, Dr. Julius No. Here he reveals a bit of his backstory. He is part Chinese, Korean, and German, and because of him, and of course of him being an outcast, he fell into crime as the only society that would accept him, and he eventually became a scientist, and during an experiment resulted in his hands being destroyed, where he wears these clunky metal ones. And as this goes on, we later find out that his services to both the East and West were rejected, and he later fell in with a criminal organization and become one of their top operatives. Now, this organization is, of course, called Spectre, which become a huge recurring organization that Bond would battle in essentially many future films, at least the early Bond films of the 60s. Eventually, Honey is taken away, and so is Bond. Now, there's a scene where Bond is escaping, which I find to be very ingenious. Again, something you should know, the early Bond, this film, Bond doesn't have any gadgets. He's a spy on his own with a loaded gun and a license to kill. That is essentially what Bond is. He eventually finds out that the villain's plot is to essentially cause radiation and missile destruction, and he just keeps moving on and on. Bond needs to prevent him, to stop this and prevent it. And as a result, Bond would later make his way to Julius's control center, and as a result, a fight breaks out between Bond and Julius, Dr. No, because Bond is essentially sabotaging Julius's operation in the control room, and results in a fight between the two, which later ends with Julius getting kicked onto this, platform, which slowly is lowering into a boiling hot radiation water. And because of his hands being of metal and clunky, he can't grab onto anything, so he's slipping into this where he gets boiled alive. And one of the first of many fates for Bond main villains to go out in spectacular and in very rare cases gruesome ways. Usually they go out in a spectacular fashion, but this is one of the first. This was the first time in the series where Bond actually had his villain go out in a very brutal way. Bond, essentially because of the radiation reaching all-time high and uncontrollable levels within the facility, it causes the whole thing to go on. Evacuate the whole facility. Bond later finds Honey where she's been essentially chained and was essentially meant to drown all this water that's slowly pouring in. Gets her out, gets out of the facility, gets on a boat, and drives off. The boat, of course, later breaks down because it won't work. They are later saved by Felix Leiter. At the last minute, finally came up with the Marines, after the 24 hours were up and take them away. And here, Honey Rider and Bond have a, well, let's just say how Bond always ends his films, finally getting the hot pretty girl. And here we end with the credits, and here ends the first film in the James Bond franchise. So, how do I personally feel about this film? Now, this film is considered an absolute classic by many, many Bond hardcore fans. And honestly, I agree with that sentiment in a way. I understand why many people say it is one of the greatest films in the Bond series. For many, it's always in the top 10. But for me, it's not in my top 10. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm not saying it's a terrible film. It's a really great film, and I understand that it was the first in a long-running film franchise that it kicked off. And it is good because it does introduce a lot of elements of the Bond films would be known for. Some, key characters that are present in this film. This included M, Moneypenny, Q, though not the definitive version. Here we also get introduced to a lot of Bond elements. Bond getting the girl, Bond taking on the bad guy, then we get a bit of action. But despite that, not all the formula is here yet. Something I want to point out, in the first two films in the series, they were still trying to figure out the formula. It wasn't until the third film where all the formula came together. Connery does the role with absolute grace and charisma. You believe that he can charm the girls, you believe he can handle himself in a fight, you believe he's intelligent enough, and he just pulls off everything you expect from him. The action side of Bond, the humor side, Sean Connery really does deliver the one-liners with such grace and even, to some case, such witty banter. But if I could be honest, something that's drawn me back about this film is it's a little bit dated and also quite vanilla. Other films went in a more spectacular and fantasy type direction and we just got bigger and badder for many films, but when you look at this, it's kind of a little bit bland. I'm not trying to beat this film. It is a fantastic film. Of course, it's not in my top 10. I did that list where I did all my favorite Bond films ranking from worst to best, but if I could be honest, this is not something that's in my top 10. It's definitely somewhere between the top 20 to 11. It deserves that spot. I absolutely praise it for. It's definitely worth watching for historical reasons, as being the first official Bond films from Eon, Sean Connery's first time in the role, and it is definitely also, but it's also kind of weak. There's stuff that is dated. I mean, look at the opening with that. The gun barrel was fine, but then you get to this weird, colorful technological stuff I'm not really interested in. You get to the dated sound effects, the jump cuts that I'm not hugely fond of in this first installment. The plot is obviously, in my opinion, the weakest because it doesn't make any sense. Hell, you even heard me trying to explain it. Not even I can fully explain the plot. And I can explain plots, anything, no matter how, convoluted they are. Also, the fact that Dr. No is an iconic villain, he doesn't appear until the end of the film. They built him up, but when we finally do get him, he does good scenes, he does really great intimidating, but there's nothing there. Overall, this film is great, it is fantastical, but it's not in my top 10. And there we have it. And, yeah, the ending... The end to my first video here, we just went through Dr. No, the first film of the James Bond series, directed by Terrence Young. We were introduced to his style in this film, and of course his contributions to the series. Sean Connery's first debut in the role, and to many people, Sean Connery is James Bond. Truly great. Join us next time as we review the second Bond film in the series.
from Russia with love. Now, just before we quickly, I wanted to wrap up with the overall success of the first Bond film. The Bond film was released in 1962 to positive reviews, and of course was on a budget to roughly $900,000 to $1 million, and ended up grossing $9 million worldwide. On a very low budget, this film managed to turn a profit, and was proved successful. A sequel was announced. But that's all we've got time for. Join us next time. And until then, this has been The Hour, the Steven Hour. Enjoy the rest of your day.